All right, we have started.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here we are at the library, starting our new program, year 2, level 2 of Grow Your Own. And as I look out the library window, it's Friday, the 10th, right, of March,
Mhm.
and we're in for another snowstorm. So I hope by the end of this hour, I can get back up the hill. Poor Melanie is going to be here till what, 5 o'clock? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we start, I want to advertise something coming up on a similar topic. The Master Gardeners are having a workshop in 2 weeks and a day. So that's Saturday, the 25th of March, from 11 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're not providing lunch, but probably some of us will make cookies or something. And where is it at? It's at our headquarters in Belmont. If you're coming from Alfred on 244, that first blinking light, you turn right as if you were going to the Bosse's. And we're about a mile down there on the left. There's a big white sign. And we're in that 2-story white building. And so we're having our workshop there. And because of the topic, which I will get to in a minute, I have a feeling we're going to fill up very rapidly. So if you're interested, it's free, but the room only holds 15 or so people. So we're not planning on doing 2 sessions.
What's it about?
Okay, what's it about? It's about this topic of how you can grow about $900 worth of vegetables in only 10 feet square. That's the same thing as 100 square feet. Or think of a king size bed, 2 of those beds. That's 100 square feet about. So we're going to be talking about what you want to grow in that small space and save $900. And then next time here, we'll talk about how to deal with that small space and make it better, more productive. So you can do that. So those are the 2 topics that we'll be covering hands-on at the workshop. So if you want to get more in depth from what you hear today and in 2 weeks on Friday, come to the workshop, let your friends know. I think it's going to be really fun. We also have free seeds to give away. And I think Pam, one of our master gardeners, has potted up some spring bulbs back in the fall. And she's got them sitting on her windowsill, poking up, and we're going to give those away also. So now that I've said all that, how do they do that? We will have advertisements in the paper from our Master Gardener coordinator. I'm sorry, since I don't use a computer, I don't know what the email is for the Allegheny County Master Gardeners in Belmont. Maybe you can find it online or call them up. No free lunch, right? You got to do a little work. Alrighty. So are we ready to really start? Okay. Now, I don't buy a lot of veggies at the store, hardly any at all, because I grow my own. And I tried to do a dollar count last time I was shopping, which is, I didn't really have paper and pencil with me. And I know everything varies. So I'm not going to swear that you can grow $900 in this small space, but I suspect you can, depending on what you grow. So we're going to start off. I have about 7, 8 suggestions on what to grow. And what's the most obvious is grow what you like to eat, right? Melanie, what do you like to eat?
Lettuce,
Lettuce,
cucumbers,
cucumbers,
not tomatoes.
not tomato.
Not tomatoes.
That's okay. My son doesn't like tomatoes either, I don't think. Potato.
Beans, peas.
Oh, well, all right. Just your most favorite.
Oh,
Let's think lettuce, and what was the second one? Cucumbers. What about you, Regina?
Squash, yellow squash.
She likes yellow squash.
I'm gonna change my answer from
Okay.
lettuce and cucumbers to peppers and cucumbers.
Peppers and cucumbers.
What kind of pepper?
Spicy or just the
Any
sweet
kind,
ones?
anything. I
And
like
you know,
spicy, I like them.
have you looked at some of the new garden catalogs lately? You know, we go through stages, and I've looked at catalogs for 50 or more years probably. And every so often, there's the new thing on the block. And now there are, in some catalogs, there are pages and pages of peppers.
Yeah, they're
Different
yeah,
peppers, maybe 50 varieties.
yeah,
And if you only have a small space, it's like, I'm gonna,
yeah.
you start off 10. No, I can't plant 10. So you go through it again and you knock
Mhm.
out half of them or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So obviously, folks, grow what you like. My story that these folks have heard before probably is when I had my 3 kids at home and my hubby, we had a huge garden and I grew lots of things and beets was one of them, but I never really liked beets. But even after everybody left, and I'm still growing just for me, I still grew some beets. And one year, Regina, I thought, why am I doing this? I really don't like to eat beets. So guess what, folks? No more beets in my garden.
right. Are they easy to grow?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And they're early and they're short and they fit in. We'll talk more next time about how to crowd things in. All righty. Our second topic is productivity. If you have a small space, you're not going to grow your kid's pumpkin
Mhm.
and you're not going to grow corn. For years, when I had a bigger garden, I grew corn. Guess who I grew it for?
The deer.
Well, the raccoons. No matter what I did, I mean, I wasn't willing to totally put a Attica state fence around it and on top. So the coons always showed up 4 to 5 days before it was ripe for me, and that was it. So I finally just gave up on the corn. But you wouldn't be growing corn in a small space anyway. For productivity's sake, it just takes up too much room. However, I asked Steve Jacoby, now if I hold it here, can they see? Hold it up a little bit. How's that?
Yep.
I asked Steve Jacoby to help me out with, because I don't have a computer, to get some images for this talk. And one was a zucchini plant or a yellow summer squash plant, because especially the new varieties have been, everybody knows we don't have an acre garden anymore. So a lot of the industry is, how can we have a zucchini bush that only takes up 3 feet, basically, in diameter? And they've come up with some summer squashes, but is still productive.
Mhm.
I have a story to tell, and maybe you guys want to either read the book from, I think, the late 30s, or watch the movie from the 40s, I think with Cary Grant and maybe Myrna Loy, those old actors from times past. It was called Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House.
I never heard of it.
Well, if you love gardening, it takes a city couple in the late 30s, early 40s, decide to move north into Connecticut, buy an old house, have an acre of land, and build their house. And so since I've built my house, it was a hoot, because of all the crazy things that get involved. But they also had a garden. They had the local guy with the horse come and plow up, the side yard, and they planted their garden, including, foolish city people, a whole row of zucchini. So halfway through the book, somehow a fire starts on the construction site, and the local volunteers come with the fire truck. And what do? They run down the garden, except for that last row, zucchini. You have to be a gardener to really get a kick out of that story. So anyway, zucchini and the summer squash are very, very productive. And so once again, if you're thinking of how much can I get out of my small space, that would be one plant or plants that you would consider. Already, number 3 is easy. Now, you really haven't vegetable gardened much at all. Oh, and you haven't either, Regina. Alrighty. But those of you that have, there are some plants that are relatively pest-free and disease-free. They're easy. And others just seem to attract a whole bunch of kind of bugs. I call them all bugs. And diseases.
Mm.
One that comes to mind is eggplant.
Mm.
Now that was another plant that I didn't love eggplant. But once again, years ago in Allegheny County, it was a challenge to grow, and I'm always up
Mm.
for a challenge, because it's a heat-loving plant.
Mm.
Think of Alabama, not Allegheny County. And even today, it's a little, even with global warming, it's a little hard. So not only did it need a long, hot season, which we usually didn't have, but I forget the kinds of insects it
Mm.
attracted. 2 or 3 kinds would be covered, the plant would be covered. And since I'm basically an organic gardener, I didn't spray. So it was like, you know what? I'm not gonna, it's too hard to grow. So, easy plants that don't take up too much of your time in effort, extra effort. Yeah, next picture has to do with your health. So what have we got here? Can you figure that out, Melanie, what that is, those things are?
Oh, it looks like lettuce and broccoli.
Lettuce and broccoli, and I think that's actually black-seeded Simpson lettuce, which is an heirloom over about 100 years old, and I grow it. It's a leaf lettuce, pale yellowy green, really beautiful.
Mhm.
When I first started gardening seriously in the 60s, I think it was called Prevention Magazine. Now, what was his name? The guy that was behind the organic movement. Do you remember, Regina? Right. Anyway, Organic Magazine and Prevention Magazine. And back in the day of Rachel Carson and her, what was that famous book she wrote? Silent Spring. People who were into organic growing were considered outliers, kooks, nuts, whatever. Well, the wheel goes round. I have to kind of laugh because now, especially among the more well-to-do, because unfortunately, it's a little harder to grow things organically. It takes more time and effort. So it costs more. But it's become the in thing to do. Especially in certain circles. One of my daughters out in San Diego is part of that, crowd that now they buy everything they can, if they can find it organically. Well, if you're still buying your vegetables, some of them are sprayed more than others. And some, like the broccoli, the spray gets down into, and even if you wash it, you're not going to get rid of all the spray. So if that concerns you, then growing your own, truthfully, for me anyway, and I do admit my garden is somewhat isolated.
Can you explain what you mean by isolated?
Oh, nobody probably has a garden within at least a mile of me.
Okay.
Although when I first moved there, Kent's Potato Farm
Oh.
was like 3 miles down the road. And I know you spray potatoes to death because they're so susceptible to so many bugs.
So if it's isolated, it's not getting sprays from other gardens or
From other gardens. Now, just as an aside here, after about 5 years, and if you're going to go this route, which takes a little more time, then you do need to go out early in the morning and walk through your garden and look. You spot a bug, one bug, squish it, that's the end of your problem. If you let that bug have babies or holler out, hey, guess what I found? And the next thing you know, you have 100. Anyway, I spotted the potato beetle, Colorado potato beetle. And for 2 years, I actually probably spent 5 minutes a day at a certain time of the year looking for the little orange eggs or for the adults and squishing. After 2 years, and that was probably 25 or 30 years ago now, 25 years ago, never again. Now, somewhere along in that time frame, Kent gave up growing potatoes. So maybe that was it. I don't know. But anyway, The more we learn and the more people read, the more they realize, you know what, I think maybe I would rather grow my own and
Mhm.
know what I'm putting in my mouth. Okay, taste. What's your favorite vegetable, you guys, as far as if you had to buy one at the store versus from your garden?
Green peas.
Green peas.
Peas. What did you say?
Peas.
Peas. Yep. Oh God, I grew up on canned peas.
So did I.
You
Yeah.
I still remember, I think I was 10 and we went across, we lived on Long Island. We went across the river to Jersey where my uncle and
Mhm.
aunt lived. And they had us for lunch, dinner in the middle of the day, because in those days it took at least 2 hours to get there.
Mhm.
Um, Frozen peas that came out
Mhm.
after the war in the 50s, and she had frozen peas and mashed potatoes,
Mhm.
lots of butter. And I still remember those peas,
Mhm.
and it totally ruined me.
Yeah, I used to think that I didn't like peas because I'd only grown up on canned peas.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I was an adult and on my own and buying my own stuff that I had peas and I was like, oh my gosh, these are amazing.
And even if peas like corn used to be before the geneticists started messing around with super sweet corn, you had to really pick them and eat them.
Mm,
And the stuff you got at the store, who knows? Was it a day old, 2, 3, 4 days?
Sure.
old? Did they ship it all the way from California, bounce
Mhm.
on the truck or the train? Alrighty, so I'm sorry, guys, you're gonna, if you have never done it and you decide to grow just one tomato plant this year, you'll never buy. No, because why? Because where do most of our tomatoes come from, especially in the winter? Where do we get our tomatoes from?
Florida.
Florida or
California.
California, I think, which means they have to ride in a truck or on a train. They're picked
Green.
green or not really
Mhm.
ripe, and they have to be tough because of the
Yeah.
bouncing, and they have to keep, because who knows how long they're gonna sit in the store. And so, yeah, they breed them for that. Toughness, da. Not for taste. It's
Mhm.
like the roses, bred for size and not for smell,
Mhm.
although they've gone back on that now. They realized people really didn't care about the size if it didn't smell like a rose.
Mhm.
Alrighty, for me, green beans,
Mm,
well, anything almost, but
Green
Yeah.
beans.
green beans,
Yeah.
tomatoes, which I don't particularly care that much for. And what was it? Oh,
Asparagus.
asparagus. Thank you. Yes.
Was that what you were thinking of?
No, I got sidetracked again thinking how most people would say, well, a potato is a potato is a potato, right?
Mhm.
No, my daughter, who never, well, she didn't remember when she was a kid, but she came back a few years ago from the West Coast. And I gave her a little strip on the edge of my garden. And that year she grew her own few hills of red Norland potatoes. So you can start harvesting the biggest one in the hill, stick your hand in under the mulch in the middle of July. And it was about that round. And she couldn't believe how good it tasted, even potatoes.
Mhm.
All right, on and on about taste. Ah, varieties. Yeah. Once again, Steve Jacoby found these online for me. This, I didn't know if he could find this. A sweet Georgia brown basically is a sweet Spanish type of potato, onions. And I love these and I grow these.
What is different about them compared to Vidalias?
Oh, she's asked a question I don't know the answer to. I think Vidalias are under the general category of sweet, sweet onions, which means they don't store well. You have to,
Mhm.
if you pull them up at the end of September, you should use them by Thanksgiving time. And they're sweeter. And they don't make good French onion soup, but they make wonderful sliced onions for either dipped and fried or on sandwiches,
Mhm.
raw.
Salads.
So they're different varieties, and Vidalia, I think, is one of them.
Because Vidalias grow in that area too, I think, don't they? Georgia and Carolinas. Spring onion.
We can't go into that today, Regina, long day, short day onions, but we will maybe next time. Or when we, later on in the season, in another month or so when we talk about onions.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me think for a second. What was I gonna say about these? No, that's okay. Hmm.
They keep good.
No, they're not keepers.
Oh.
All the sweet onions are not keepers. But that wasn't what I was thinking of. Maybe it'll come back to me. Many different variety. Oh, I know now. Do you all buy a bushel of peaches in August to can or freeze? Well, I do. And I usually go up to a nursery in Naples. And you can buy a bushel or two and you take them home and you spend 2-3 days. I don't can anymore. I freeze them all. But anyway, anybody that knows anything about peaches, once again, varieties matter. Some are freestone, which is what you want, because you want to slice it and have it all fall off the pit and not have to, or some are good for pies, fresh, some can well, some freeze well. So anyway, here was a bushel and there was no label on it. So I looked at the young girl and said, "What kind are they?" And she looks at the bushel of peaches and looks at me and then says,
Peaches.
"They're yellow." That is what we're raising these days, people that don't know anything. I'm sorry, it's true. They just don't know. New York State used to raise 150 years ago, at least 100 varieties of apples. Once again, an apple is not just red. If you want cider, or do you want to make applesauce? Or do you want to make pies? Or do you want to eat it fresh? Do you want it to sit in your basement and last until May? All those different varieties were grown for different reasons. Portland apples, which were a mutation, just popped up in some orchard here near Cortland, New York. Did you know you slice that apple, and unlike all the others, it sits there and doesn't get brown. So you use your Cortland apples when you want to make a salad with apples.
My grandmother preferred them for pies.
Yeah, when I make my applesauce, I do the regular. We're getting off track here. And then I take a Cortland apple and cube it up. And after it's all done cooking and all done with the sugar, I dump the raw Cortlands in my applesauce and then I freeze it. But hey, we're getting off topic. So if you grow your own garden, you can, don't go to the box stores. They're not going to help you with varieties that are unusual. You had to go to the catalogs, especially the ones that have been around for 100 years and are still owned by the family, not bought up by corporate America. That's not interested in truth and reliability. They're just interested in the money. And so do your research. And if you want some specialty peppers or tomatoes, what else? Green lettuces. Remember when we were young? What kind of one lettuce was out there? Remember what it was?
Green.
Green. Berg, yes. Tasteless, but I don't know, iceberg lettuce. No wonder I never liked salads when I was a kid. And now, in the last maybe 30 years, I lose track. All sorts. Yellow green, dark green, copper colored, bronze colored. The romaines that grow tall. The leaf lettuces that you can cut comes again. So then the problem becomes, I want to grow them all and I don't have the room. Okay, so varieties. Go vertical. What was it you grew vertical?
Cucumbers.
Cucumbers. Want to tell us about that?
I love cucumbers. I don't remember
Gherkins?
the name.
No.
I don't remember the name, but they were only about this long, about 5-6 inches long.
Well, cucumbers like zucchini really should be picked when they're 4 or 5 inches long. Forget this. Here we go again. I listen to the BBC sometimes, and every so often there's a news report. Somebody somewhere in England has found another unexploded or undetonated bomb from World War II. And about 4 years ago, some gardener, I forget where in England, he was working out in his, they call them marrow patch. And at first he thought, oh my God, that got away from me. Look, it's almost 2 feet long. It was a bomb from World War II that had somehow worked up in the soil in his backyard. But how did I get off on this? Oh, pick them small.
But there are varieties that are meant to just be small.
Yes, and that's why I thought gherkins, which is a type of pickle, isn't it, gherkins? And they're only 3 inches or so. However, my daughter, and I asked Steve to get a picture of this one. Now, is that clear for them? 2 or 3 years ago, when my daughter first got her tiny little strip of the garden, Mary Harris, another master gardener, had started tomato seeds in March, I think. And come May, when it was time to put them out, she had too many. So I think Laura inherited a Jetstar indeterminate tomato, which means it keeps growing until frost gets it. So think of Jack's beanstalk, right? So here, I don't know where Steve, he didn't tell me where this came from. Obviously, I don't think one person could eat all of these tomatoes, so it must be some sort of commercial setup.
And are they smaller, like
Yes,
cherries?
They're the cherry size.
Okay.
Yeah, just about like my fingers. And in clusters of like 15, as I recall, and they just keep going. We had to put up another pole like 7 feet high, and then they flopped over. And the first frost got the bottom part, but the top kept going. So some things like cucumbers, I suppose you could grow your kid's jack-o'-lantern one at the very end of your plot if you wanted to, and make it go up instead of out. But your tomatoes definitely can. Okay. What else? Okay. Do we have a picture now of those gardens in the sun? I sent her on a wild goose chase and then decided not to use the beautiful saffron crocus. Okay, here's a sunny garden. Looks like it's in the middle of summer. Things are all crowded together and chugging along. What else did we have? Another one earlier in the season, I would guess, or maybe in midsummer when you're doing your second planting. Now, what else have we got?
That's all.
Was that all? We're not going to talk about the what about the fences? Let's just pop up the first fence. Was that the first one? Okay, we'll get to fencing in a minute. But let's think about shape. If you are starting a new garden or deciding to throw up your hands and say, my old garden is just in the wrong spot. What kind of 10 square feet, no, 10 feet square or 100 square feet can be arranged in a different ways. So I think the first thought was, well, let's just do 10 by 10. That is if you're worried about the cost of your fencing would be most economical, because a square,
It's compact.
it takes up for the perimeter, the shortest perimeter for the space involved inside. However, take a look at this garden that Melanie found fenced in. There's a path down the middle. Yeah, why don't you come around, Regina, so you can see. So if your garden is 10 by 10, you're going to need at least 1 foot, if not 2 feet down the middle for a path so that you can reach into what turns out to be your 2 beds. So if it's a 2 foot wide path, now maybe if you're younger than me and more agile, you can manage with a 1 foot wide path, but I find I can't do that anymore. I need about 2 feet to stay upright. So you're throwing away 20% of your garden space for a path. So, what are were they all pretty much square or rectangular? Okay. Oh, no, that's a bigger one. Okay, Melanie found a whole series of fences, which we'll talk about briefly in a minute. My suggestion, well, why don't you tell us what you did with your by the driveway, your lettuce patch, remember?
I made a raised bed.
a raised bed, and what were the dimensions? Do you
Um,
remember?
I don't remember. 2 feet by 6 feet, I think.
All right, so you did a small bed.
Mhm.
Okay, my suggestion would be if you want to do your 100 feet, that if you make it 4 feet wide
Mhm.
from each side, you can reach in 2 feet
Mhm.
to weed, to thin, to harvest, to mulch.
Mhm.
So that means 4 times 25 feet will give you the
Mhm.
same 100 square feet with no waste space for
Mhm.
baths. So, well, I don't have 100 feet. My yard's too small. Well, then make two beds. 4 feet by 12, 4 by 13.
Mhm.
Or if you're fussy, 12 and a half,
Mhm.
12 and a half, right? Or however you want to do it. But that way, yes, if you're going to fence it, you're going to need more fencing to go
Mhm.
down a long skinny rectangle. But now I can't resist, and I'm not going to give you the answer. You're going to have to ponder it and get annoyed and try and figure it out. Why, if you're going to have 100 square feet, your garden cannot be in a circle? Anyway,
Can't reach inside though,
forget about that.
right?
Just think of the math. Why can't I make it a circle if I want 100 feet square? Okay, we'll move on and you can rack your brains. I was asked that question when I applied to a college on Long Island when I was 18 by this man that was interviewing me.
Mhm.
He didn't have a clue. I stood
Mhm.
there like a dummy. It was only he didn't give me the answer, and it was only years later that I realized.
Mhm.
Anyway, we'll move on. What time is it? How are we doing on time?
12 o'clock.
Really? Only
Yep.
12 o'clock?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Oh, look, the snow has almost stopped. But my car out there is covered with, looks like a half an inch of fluff. Okay. Companion planting. Now, what do we usually think of when we go, if we go to hear a lecture on companion planting, what is it usually about?
One thing keeps the pests away,
All right,
marigolds.
okay, marigolds have a reputation for keeping away the bugs or certain kinds of bugs from all plants or certain plants. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
All plants.
All plants.
Yeah.
Okay. I have another. Oh, you have something to say?
I always think of with companion planting, I think of like the Native Americans with the
Ah,
corn, beans, and squash.
okay, hang on to that thought for a
Okay.
second. One of my definitions, and later on in the season, I think we're going to talk about it, is interplanting flowers with your vegetables purely for an aesthetic reason, for the color and the beauty. Nothing to do with keeping bugs away or
Mm.
taking certain nutrients that the other plant needs, whatever, just for the beauty of it. But what I'm talking about here is how can we plant things closer together, but they can still flourish? And I left that picture home, so I'll just describe it. Yes, Becca, you need
No,
us?
no.
No, okay.
Mhm.
This is our assistant librarian who holds down the fort when Melanie, the head of the library, is taken away by this program. Thanks for coming in today on the snow, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, usually out of sight, out of mind. So when you go out into the garden looking for bugs or for something that's ripe to harvest, you're looking above the ground, aren't you? At the plant, the stem, the leaves, the fruit, the berries, whatever. What's going on under the ground though? Yes, the top of the plant needs to share the sun, but it's really what's going on underground that produces a healthy plant. Is there enough water? Is there enough airspace? How do the roots grow? So, let's see, I wanted to make sure I've got this right. I wrote it down. I have a picture, but I forgot to bring it in. Certain plants, think onions and lettuce. Let's go below the soil. those plants have fibrous roots, tiny little roots that spread out. So if your iceberg lettuce is a foot in diameter, chances are under the ground for about a foot around in diameter, all these fibrous little roots are sucking up the water, the moisture, the fertilizer, the nutrients.
Mm.
But what about a carrot? Have you grown carrots?
Long time ago.
When you pull them up, what happens? Basically, what is it?
It's like a big root.
The carrot is the big root, and unless you foolishly added a lot of manure, and then you get all these fibrous roots off the carrot, yeah, that you have to peel off. But it's a tap root. Think beets, think carrots. So, and they're both early spring, cool weather crops. So you can have a row of lettuce, and very close to it, a row of carrots or beets. Or a row of onions, carrots and beets. And the nice thing about that is they are efficiently sharing the soil underneath, and they don't really interfere with their leaf structure above ground either. And also, onions you put out in late April, say, and they go all the way to frost. Your carrots will go for about 10 weeks to the middle of July. But your lettuce or your spinach, or your carrots or your beets, they're usually gone within 2 months.
Mm.
So by compressing, let's say there's a row of onions, and then on one side you have a row of lettuce or spinach, quite close. The other side, beets and carrots. The lettuce and spinach are gone pretty, by the middle, end of June. The beets by the end of June, the carrots by the middle of July. The onions can just sit there in all their glory and take up then all the space and all the sun for the rest of the summer.
Do they keep growing all that time?
Which,
Onions,
oh yeah, well,
they get bigger and bigger?
yeah. If you, okay, we gotta wait for when we talk about onions next month,
Okay.
because that's a whole topic.
Okay.
But yes, they should keep growing. All right, where's my list? Ta-da. Then succession. What do I mean by that? I don't mean the king is dead and the Sunday's over.
But once,
That just popped into my head.
I would guess one thing quits growing, you can start another thing.
Exactly. How many people do I see their I don't see them. I don't know who they are. I just drive by and see their garden. And it's all tilled up in the springtime, and they've got things growing by June because they started way too late. And then by late July, it's just a weed patch. Because they got bored, they got busy, they lost interest, whatever. Or they didn't think, oh, all this early stuff is done, that they could plant a whole second garden the last half of the gardening year. So all that early stuff, lettuce, spinach, beets, carrots, green onions, radishes, they're all done by, if not the end of June, by the middle of July. Then, in a sense, you can plant those early short seasoned crops all over again to harvest in late September, even into October. Because things like carrots and beets and green onions and all those will take a light frost. Or even more than a light frost. Or you can just, toss a sheet over them for once or twice in October. They keep growing. However, if you do this, and once again, we'll talk about rotation some other time, but very briefly, since every vegetable, it's like you have kids, one will eat nothing but macaroni and cheese, and the other one will eat nothing but what? Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. She has young kids still. Same with the veggies in the garden. Each crop draws out of the soil certain nutrients. So if you're going to replant your beets, your carrots, etc., don't plant them in the same spot you did in the spring. Rotate them. So let's say You don't want to crowd out the onions, but maybe when you don't grow peas. Well, we'll talk more about this in depth when I've thought about it more rotation. What you want to do is put your beets where the carrots were, or put the lettuce where the beets were.
Mm.
So that once again, they have a chance to use up the other nutrients that are still there. All right. Before we move on to the last thing, money. We've talked about those early things that can be repeated in the fall, but some things are warm weather crops and you can't put them out till middle to late of May. And they would be your tomatoes, your zucchini, your green beans, things like that. They have to wait till later. Therefore, they will take up the space, the rest of the space for the rest of the year. Then you have your all season. Your onions go in April and they don't come out till late September or October. You have tomatoes. Once you set them out in the middle of May with maybe a box to put over them when it gets cold at night, they'll be there till frost. Your potatoes that go out in late April, they'll be there until the end of the gardening season. So some of those things are there the whole season. You can't add things at the end of the year. So finally, price. Maybe, I don't know, have you gone vegetable shopping lately? I don't buy vegetables. What about you? I don't know. What do things cost these days? You can't off the top of your head.
What did I buy? I think I paid like $3.69 for a bunch of asparagus recently.
And where did that asparagus come from?
I don't know.
You were paying the trucking
Yeah.
it up from Florida.
Lettuces,
How much? How much?
$3.69, I think.
For
It
a
was-
bunch that like
It was
that?
like this big.
Okay, that big and that tall.
Yeah.
And probably the stems at the bottom were only good for soup, is my guess.
Yeah, I cut
Yeah.
those off. Yeah. I don't remember how much I paid for potatoes.
Celery
lettuce.
got expensive, I thought.
Which
Celery, about $3 for a bunch
one?
of celery.
Yeah, I never eat celery, so
Well,
once I escaped my mother and
Yeah.
Thanksgiving nothing like ruining the dressing by putting celery in it as far as
celery.
you like celery. This is not a fair example because there's two problems. One is the out of season price.
Mhm,
And then there's just the general price when things are in season
mhm.
and they're cheaper. On my birthday, my daughter decided to treat me, even though she should have known better. And as soon as I saw them, I knew better. She bought, I don't think it was more than a cup, if that, of red raspberries.
Mhm.
They looked beautiful. They were big, red, and utterly tasteless.
Mm.
And they cost $7.
Mm.
So if you want oranges in the summertime, when orange trees don't produce oranges anywhere, or raspberries in February, yes, you're going to pay a lot of money for them. I have to replant it because after 30 years, it's dying back. A 15-foot row of raspberries that's about 2 feet wide. And I have enough to eat fresh for 3 to 4 weeks in July, August,
Mhm.
and enough to make, I don't know, 10 or so pints of frozen raspberries and half a dozen jars of jam, and they taste like raspberries.
Mhm.
So I'm listening to the radio how people are not able to buy certain things anymore because they have gotten so expensive. So just think about if you buy local and in season, if you don't have a garden,
Mhm.
then things are going to be much cheaper for you
Mhm.
than having lettuce come all the way from California. What was that movie? East of Eden, with that young actor that was killed, James Dean. I still, he had that scheme to prove to his father that he could make something of himself. And so it was just after the war, I think, and refrigerated train cars were just coming in. So he grew all this lettuce and he was going to ship it to Chicago or wherever. And then for some reason, the train got stuck and couldn't leave,
Oh,
and all the lettuce just rotted
mm.
and them lying on the ground crying. Powerful movie, powerful scene. But that's where most of us get our lettuce, etc., from asparagus, pure asparagus. So it's not only being grown somewhere else, but they have to ship it to you. So, and well, once again, I think I'm out of my talk for today. Next time, we're going to talk about what to do with that small bit of land that you have to make it as productive and healthy as possible. All right. So questions or comments, or what time is it?
It's quarter after.
Lots of time.
Oh, we have a lot. How did that happen? Well, come on, guys, help me out. She's dying to get to the onions. This is like when I taught and I would ask the ones at the back of the room.
So have you started your plants indoors, your garden?
Yeah, well, first of all, as I wrote in some garden column months ago, years went by before I decided to grow. It was Colleen Cavanagh that got me going on it. Our ex, most beloved leader of Master Gardeners for many years. And she would always grow lettuce indoors in the wintertime. So a few years ago, I actually started, underneath my light. And I think I sowed the seeds in Thanksgiving weekend and started eating lettuce, leaf lettuce, because that grows best indoors and you could cut it off and it comes again, or you take the outer leaves and it keeps growing. So I had 18 little cups. No, I used bigger cups this time. The sour cream cartons, whatever that is, a little bit bigger. And by this third week in January, I was having salad. And I'm down now. I dumped out half of them and I've kept the dark ones. They seem to really do well as far as growing fast. And so, yeah. And so then a week ago, I planted my broccoli, my tomatoes, my onions, seeds. And the broccoli took 5 days and now it's popping up. Now, okay, we have time. So I'll divert into onions.
So what, you've got tomatoes, broccoli, and what else do you have? That you've started to?
Laura's peppers.
Oh.
And then a bunch of flowers, mostly my daughter's. She's into growing flowers in her vegetable garden more than vegetables, it seems like sometimes, but it's her 100 square feet, so whatever.
Oh, she has a garden at your home?
Yeah, it's 4 feet wide and 20 feet long. And then when the daffodils die back over by the fence, it's another 20 square feet or something. That she puts things later out. Yeah.
I have a question, different, it's a little different, but yesterday I was looking at my plants out in the front. And my irises, they're all just dead leaves laying on the ground.
The iris, you're saying?
Yes. And so what do I do with them? And also, like, there's a daisy plant that was a big full one. It looks like it already started to grow.
It probably did because
And now it's all brown,
Yeah.
frozen. Do I cut them all off at the ground?
There's a couple of theories about how to do fall cleanup. And one theory is think of Mother Nature. She doesn't show up with a broom and a rake and whatever in October and clean up. She just lets things fall and they rot down, and then new things grow in the spring, and then next fall the leaves and the whatever. So if you've had no disease problems, just leave it be. Now, if you don't like the looks of it, I always mulch. So even if it's only an inch of, say, mowed leaves to cover up and make it look nice, do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And what happened was, because of climate change, our weather has gotten very erratic. I think I mentioned this last time. My electric bill shows the average temperature of the month compared to the year before. And let me think. January was like 12 to 13 degrees warmer than the year
Mhm.
before.
It's January.
January,
Mm.
which means, and then February was 7 degrees warmer.
Mm.
Now, if you look at the scale of the average temperature throughout the year, every month is about from winter, January to June, July, every month is 7 degrees warmer on average. So in December, it was like the weather normally would have been, what's 2 months before that, November. And February is like more like March. So my snowdrops are already blooming. And my snow crocus have started to bloom. And my daffodils pushing the mulch up. But what happens? Then all of a sudden it's 20 degrees out. And daffodils used to be absolutely foolproof. The deer didn't eat them because they're
Mhm.
poisonous. They grew, unless you were in a puddle. And they always came up in late April and started blooming late April into May. And now here it is, the beginning of March, and they're already poking up. And then they get zapped with a cold frost and it kills the leaves. And so now you have, instead of beautiful green leaves in your daffodils, green leaves with yellow droopy dead tops.
Oh, should I cover them up to protect them?
Well, I said, I'm darned if I'm gonna go out there with my sheets to cover up the daffodils in March or February. But I did think about my snowdrops, and it went to 20, I think, a few nights ago, and they were up and the snow had melted and they were beginning to bloom. And the next day they looked kind of like, oh, they're not really happy. But they seemed to perk up the next day. And I think we'll get enough snow tonight when it's gonna go down to 15 or something, I think the next night or so. Or in 2 nights. So yeah, that is a problem that we didn't used to have. We grumbled about our zone 4. And I can't grow my eggplant or my sweet potatoes or what, other things that. But with this crazy off again, on again, I think it's worse
Mhm.
because, things think it's springtime, the
Mhm.
ones that are based on temperature in the soil. And then they get zapped, which is what happened to the apple crop. I'm saying 4 or 5 years ago, almost all the apples in Wisconsin, which is one of the biggest apple producers, 90% of them got zapped they started blooming early and then they got a hard frost and the blossoms were all killed.
Mm.
Do I have time for onions or not? What time is it?
Yes, you do.
Okay, onions, and we'll go into more detail on onions in maybe next month or so, when it's time to start putting them out. However, if you want nice big 4-5 inch bulbs, you have to do one of 2 things. 3 things, I guess. You have to buy the bulbs from the industry
Mhm.
or from the nursery, the catalogs, the sets that the plants that they've started, or start your own from seed.
Mhm.
The reason being, onions, more so than some plants, are connected to the latitude that they grow on the earth and when springtime comes. And we call it short day or long day onions.
Mm.
We live in the north where the days are long in the summer. The further north you go, the longer the day until you have 24 hours, right? Well, they don't grow onions up there,
Mhm.
but the further south you go, the more even the day. Kathy from San Diego always complains. She says, I don't know, in the summertime, it just gets dark early here. I love visiting you guys up in June because the sun doesn't go down till later.
Mm.
So the onions who evolved in southern climates are different than the ones that evolved in the north. And what happens is the southern ones, like your
Dahlia.
Vidalia, will not bulb out up here in the north because the day length is wrong for them.
Hmm.
So they need to have, when they're ready to bulb out, they need to have long as much light as possible, the longest day as possible. So if you simply sow your seeds in late April, by the time June comes, they're slow growing.
Mm.
So the root system, they're just not ready to start putting the energy into making bulbs. So you'll get bulbs, but they'll only be maybe 2 inches in diameter.
Mm.
So you start your seeds in early March, and they grow indoors under your light, and you have to give them a haircut once or twice and then come late April, and your ground's all prepared ahead of time in the fall. Sorry, guys who are starting a new garden. And you make a trench and you take out all these tiny little onion plants that are now 6 weeks old,
Mhm.
and you lay them in the trench every 3 inches or so, fill them in. They're all laying sideways. Next morning, they're all standing upright,
Mm.
and you've got that head start of a couple of weeks,
Mhm.
so that when June and July roll around, they start really filling out.
Mm.
And by August, I've got, I've thinned out, eaten every other one. But the ones that are left to go through hardening off, no, not hardening off, drying out in September. Usually it doesn't rain that much in September, so they're ready to harvest. You have nice, big, beautiful bulbs.
Mm.
The reason I don't buy the sets anymore is this is my opinion. You can sue me if you want. Many of the companies that grew the bulbs loved their work, treated them right, stored them over, they grew them in the fall, stored them in a warehouse
Mhm.
over the winter at the proper temperature. We're fine 30, 40 years ago. Many of those companies have been bought up by agribusiness now who don't care about things like that. And it's cheaper to not keep the warehouses, than my guess is, as cold as they should. So you buy all these sets, and quite a few of them don't grow. And the ones that grow never grow into the big 4 inches anymore. They peter out at about 2 inches in diameter.
Mhm.
And I attribute it to the fact that they're not wintering them over in the warehouses properly. So I just don't bother doing it anymore because it's not worth it.
So you've grown from seed?
So I grow them from seed. And that's the way I can get, another onion that I love. But once again, things go out of fashion so quickly. Red wing, because yes, it's a dark, beautiful purpley red on the outside, and you slice it,
Mm.
red, white, red, white, red. The rings, some of those red onions are only red on the outside, and then they're white in the middle.
Mm.
If I'm going to have a sliced onion on my salad or my hamburger, I want it red, white, red, white. So I'm still hunting for red wing. My normal catalog didn't have them this year.
Oh,
Oh, anyway, we're probably out of time, aren't we?
we are coming up on it.
Okay, so don't forget, if you want more of this in hands, and in depth, and also how to better your soil, come to that workshop, but it's free, but you got to sign up. So the Master Gardener's email address, whatever that is. Do you happen to know what it is?
I don't.
No, you don't. That's okay. And don't call Melanie. She doesn't want 100 people calling her to find out. Call the Master Gardeners in Belmont, Allegheny County. How do they call it? Allegheny County Master Gardeners, I guess. Or call me at home. Maybe I'll have the information. Maybe I won't. Okay, am I going to get up the hill in this inch of snow?
I think
Yeah.
you're